Last week, I was invited to ENCA's Power to Truth with Professor J.J. Tabane. Among the issues I got a chance to mention was that we need to embrace capitalism and shun communism as South Africa. Due to time, I was unable to answer a very important question that I think many South Africans ask themselves too. If communism is so bad, why is China so successful? I thought it is essential to give the response I never got the chance to give on that show. Welcome to Citizen Concerned, where we remind you to beware of the comrades. I'm Katlego. Please subscribe to the channel and share the videos wherever you can.
Tell me about China, because you're saying communism, you have put it in a dustbin. China is the second biggest economy in the world. Address that for me.
All right. For some reason, many South Africans believe that China is a communist country, and the economic success they see in China gives them the idea that communism might not be such a bad idea after all. And so I hope that this video will show us all that although it was once a communist country, China is not a communist country today. It is a free market, or what you might call a capitalist country. In trying to be like Russia, aka the Soviet Union or USSR, Mao Zedong established Communist China in 1949. It was only during the leadership of Mao Zedong that China was a true communist country. I've covered some of this topic or some of this period on this channel, so please find the links to the videos in the description below. Without wasting time, I will shed some light on how the communist journey went for China and how and why China got to economic success. Generally, communists hate anyone who is richer than them. They usually talk about taking from the rich or those that are in the middle class, better known by communists as the bourgeoisie. The main idea is that these people are rich because they have stolen from the poor. Instead of learning to build or create, communists only want to take from those that have so that everyone can be equal, which usually means equally poor. They have this foolish belief that if they take from the rich, then we will all be equally rich, but that is a lie. Under Mao Zedong's leadership, the Chinese communists took all the land. Private landowners, landlords, and rich farmers who had worked hard for their property were beaten to death as their land and property was taken from them by the state with the intention of giving it to the poor. So this was seen as a success because finally there was no inequality. Unfortunately, more than 700,000 people were killed during the land reform process. And as bad as it was, that was but the beginning of communism-induced deaths in China. During what is now known as a Counterrevolutionary Campaign, anyone who did not support the Communist Party was arrested. Basically, anyone who had a different political or economic opinion was punished for their differing views. Anyone who did not believe in or support communism was arrested, and this resulted in more than 2 million citizens being arrested. In addition to the 2 million prisoners, more than 1 million citizens were sentenced to reflect on their crimes through what was called labor reforms. To me, it just seems like slavery. Remember what I mentioned, that the killing of the 700,000 people during the land reforms was just the beginning of the deaths? Well, more than 600,000 citizens were executed because they didn't believe in communism or were suspected to be counter-revolutionaries. That, my friend, is what they call the Counter-Revolutionary Campaign during communist China. The best thing that happened during that time was the eradication of drug production and drug dealing. Drug-related crimes fell during the period as more than 10 million addicts were forced into compulsory treatment and drug dealers were executed. So that was the silver lining of Mao Zedong's communist China. Now that we have appreciated the silver lining that existed, let's go back to the storm that raged on and on in communist China.
天大地大，不如党的恩情大；爹亲娘亲，不如毛主席亲。千好万好，不如社会主义好。河神海神。
Mao Zedong also caused what is known as the Cultural Revolution, where he encouraged the destruction of what he called the Four Olds, referring to the old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits.
In 1966, I was in the middle school when the Cultural Revolution started. Of course, I joined. It's glorious to join here. I was totally pour my energy, even my life, into it to support whatever Mao asked me to do.
During this Cultural Revolution, anyone seen with a hairstyle or dress code like what was considered bourgeoisie was beaten and harassed.
Well, I was 14 when the Cultural Revolution started in 1966. And schools were closed, and there was no schooling, and the children were encouraged to attack their teachers. So I saw my teachers being tortured, being subjected to these gigantic denunciation meetings, being beaten up. I saw fellow pupils trying to commit suicide.
Teachers were the target of the political campaign. Mao taught us they have to receive the re-education by the worker and peasant. My female teacher, I love. She liked to wear beautiful clothes. She cared for appearance. There was a criminal accusation. One boy went to her bedroom and lead so many people. She went there to cut her hair. I went there too late. The hair has been cut already. He was humiliated. I couldn't help. I couldn't rescue her. Shame on me.
Many were murdered and others were forced to commit suicide. The Cultural Revolution was a success because Mao Zedong was being supported by teenagers and young adults who walked around terrorizing cities. They would wear their red armbands and other red items of clothing. They would later be known as the Red Guards. Even cats were killed because they were viewed as symbols of bourgeois decadence. Estimates put the number of people who died due to the Cultural Revolution between 500,000 and 2 million. Anyone against Mao Zedong was a target. That was a period of China that was communist. Very difficult to see signs of success there, right?
And so one day I went to the classroom and I saw a note on the blackboard. No class for 3 days. And that 3 days lasted for 2 years.
2 years?
2 years. No school. Like all the other institutions was shut down by the Red Guards. Red Guards were the kids. So every day we went to the street, we watched the Cultural Revolution unfolding. And that is struggle sessions, parade of those people who were denounced and eventually become violence.
So it was young people aiming their rage at the behest and the direction of the central government of Mao against not foreigners who threatened China, but against Chinese, against your own people.
Yes, and it took me a long time to understand what that Cultural Revolution was about. It is a revolution that Mao launched against CCP, against his own party, against his own government. Why? Because he thought he was losing influence. So it's really a power struggle.
Those rounded up were made to write self-denunciations. They wore names on their backs: capitalist, landlord, criminal, pervert. Many were driven out of Beijing in the name of purifying the revolutionary capital.
这里就是母亲的墓地。
Zhang Hongbing's mother lies meters from the spot. where she was executed in the Cultural Revolution. The years of upheaval and destruction Mao unleashed claimed perhaps 1 million lives. Even so, Fang Zhongmo's case stands out. It was her zealous teenage son who denounced her as a counter-revolutionary.
In this period of communist China, there were struggle sessions where wives turned on husbands and vice versa. Children turned on parents and snitched on each other for being capitalists or agents of capitalism. Teachers were beaten and humiliated by their students. Parents shamed by their children in public. Some were publicly shot to death.
在这中间，父亲和我先后到公检法军管组报案。母亲，没有辩护律师，在不到2个月的时间就被定为反革命罪，执行枪决了。
The Red Guards searched the homes of officials of the pre-revolutionary government, former landlords who now lived in the city, former capitalists who had long since given up their assets.
Another way in which citizens of China were dying under communism was through Mao Zedong's grand 5-year plans. The first 5-year plan, which was between 1953 and 1958, was a period where rapid development was to occur. This is when industries grew very fast. The Chinese worked very hard with the guidance of the Russian or the Communist Soviet Union. This period was an actual success. And I think it must have given a lot of people hope that actually this communist thing is a good idea. But as history would record it, this was not the case. During the same time, Mao Zedong had seen in some communist governments that they were collapsing, all around the world. And he believed that it was because people were not allowed to express themselves. So, to avoid his own government collapsing, he established the 100 Flowers campaign, in which he encouraged his followers to voice their concerns and openly criticize the Communist Party. The people took the opportunity and started really criticizing the Mao Zedong government to the point where within a few months, Mao Zedong reversed his decision and started to persecute all the people who had criticized or even those that were suspected to have criticized the Communist Party. More than 500,000 people were persecuted by the communists in China because they expressed their opinions. I'm sure it dawned on some that actually this communism thing is not as good as it seemed.
There is only one correct way of thinking, of talking, and if you don't do it, you'll get into trouble.
The next 5-year plan is what is known as a Great Leap Forward. This was started in 1958. The idea was to turn China into an industrial nation. Many of the peasants were forced to work massive infrastructure projects, which included iron and steel production. Some private food production was banned, and a lot of farm production was brought under collective ownership. Apart from the dictatorship and unnecessary executions, another major problem of communism is exactly this kind of behavior. They believe in running the economy as the government instead of allowing skilled and experienced individuals to contribute to the economy in their unique and creative ways. The government decided what was to be produced, how and when it was to be produced. This is exactly what happened in Venezuela and in Cuba. Communists don't understand that the government cannot be able to know all the details of small, intricate details that make economies work. The fact is, no one person or one institute knows everything, and thinking and believing otherwise is never a good idea. The government interfering with the economy is a very bad idea, and this is why China did not experience economic success under communism. Stay tuned to understand what led to China's success. Forcing people to work on these so-called massive industrial developments resulted in a significant reduction in agricultural produce. Remember that anyone who expressed themselves was persecuted. So when production fell because of Mao Zedong's communist policies, the people who were in charge of these collectives were too scared to report on the disaster in order to avoid persecution. They kept saying production was great. So the Communist Party believed that there was great success, and hence they demanded that even larger portions of the agricultural produce be brought to the city for consumption and for exports. Now add droughts and floods into the mix and you have a recipe for disaster. The farmers were left with no food, resulting in what is now known as the Great Chinese Famine, where more than 30 million people died due to hunger in this period. Some estimates put the number above 40 million people. Meanwhile, the Chinese government kept on exporting food. They exported to pay the USSR, and they even exported to other communist countries like North Korea and North Vietnam for free. This is very common among communists. They don't value the lives of their own people, but they value the lives of communists in other countries while their own people suffer. During the time that people suffered, Mao Zedong also allocated less food to people who were business people, religious leaders, and many other counter-revolutionaries. That is what communist governments do. Let's not forget that the same kind of famine happened in Russia, where millions also died of hunger because of communism. What about the rapid industrialization and all the iron and steel that were meant to be produced during that period? China did not have enough raw materials to produce the steel. The furnaces were mostly homemade furnaces in the rural areas. They used grass and other poor quality fuels to fire the furnaces instead of coal. They used assorted scrap metal, including plates and furniture, to feed into the furnaces along with pots and pans. In some instances, they even used their farming equipment to feed into the furnaces in order to produce the steel. All this was done to please the great commander-in-chief Mao Zedong. When the time came to farm, the farmers did not have farming equipment, and most of the steel produced was worthless in any case. So, to summarize, Mao Zedong took over China with his communist ideologies and 5-year plans. The results were arrests of the counter-revolutionaries, killings of the middle class and rich during the land reform process, death by execution for having a different viewpoint, death by struggle sessions where citizens were turning against each other, death by famine due to government-planned economy, and dictatorship. This summary shows that communism did not result in the success of the nation of China. If anything, all these communist-inspired events destroyed the economy and the lives of many people in China. This period actually pushed China back into the hands of capitalism. 2 men rescued the economy and the country by importing food from nations such as Canada and Australia. The food was imported from capitalist countries. After Mao Zedong's death, Deng Xiaoping became the leader of China, and it didn't take him long to understand what needed to be done. He believed that China needed to learn from countries that were more advanced than China. The one country that he learned from was Singapore. He visited Singapore and realized what communism had deprived him and the rest of China from. So after his visit, he sent thousands of Chinese people to Singapore, not for holiday, but to learn the Singapore ways.
The man he rusticated, Deng Xiaoping, came back from the wilderness. In 1978, he visited Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, and Singapore to persuade us to combine with China and stop Vietnam, the Cuba in Southeast Asia of the Soviet Union, when they were about to attack Cambodia. I had the privilege of meeting him, talking to him for 3 days.
Deng Xiaoping visited the United States. That is a time that business contacts with America started to grow. Apart from learning from America and Singapore, Deng also learned from Japan, as he viewed Japan as a great example of a country to learn from economically. With regards to America, Deng believed that since China was a smaller power that needed capitalist America in order for China to modernize, it was important for China to lower their head and not stand out or be a problem. So not threaten and challenge America when they actually had nothing as China. Tell that to South African leaders who are carelessly making threats to America. Just know your place. Just shut your mouth before threatening and speaking against monstrous countries that have the power to crush our country with minimum effort. We can use these Western countries to grow our countries and our economies. Just lower your head, play friendly. That's what Deng Xiaoping did, and that's how you do your foreign policy, right? Instead of hating capitalism, Deng is known to have said it doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. And these are the thoughts and decisions that led to the economic success of China that many want to attribute to communism. From around 1980, Deng invited and worked to attract foreign capitalists, aka foreign companies, to special economic zones in China. These are the areas where capitalism started in China. These are the areas where industries boomed in China. These areas were the ones that ended up manufacturing products for the West. Deng and his team initiated the reform and opening up program that introduced elements of market capitalism to the Chinese economy. Many American companies ended up opening manufacturing plants in China because Chinese people were not too expensive. So capitalism was allowed to come and give them jobs while paying them way less than Western countries. These special economic zones include places like Shenzhen. Foreign investments by companies like Apple, Nike, Ray-Ban, Dell, Chevrolet, Chanel, and many others made China what it is today. These reforms that Deng Xiaoping and his allies carried out gradually led China away from a planned economy, as was the case under Mao Zedong, and China turned its back against communism and adopted free markets. Many items are made in China not because it is a successful communist country, but because it is a successful capitalist country. Capitalists have factories in China, so China is definitely capitalist. While China rejected communist ideas in their economy, unfortunately, they held on to the aspects of communism such as censorship and dictatorship. While they embraced free trade, they have not embraced freedom of expression, religion, opinion, just like it was during the time of Mao Zedong.
People that are 14 now, 15 now, 16 now, unless they've read Wild Swans, where would they get any information about it? What do young Chinese people know about the Cultural Revolution?
Well, basically not much, because my books are banned in China, like other books of the kind. And there are people who are saying these mindless things in favor of the Cultural Revolution, which don't get banned. So young people, actually, a lot of young people don't really know what happened.
There is still religious persecution. There is one-party rule. The Communist Party still controls the country. Citizens are not allowed to have opinions that contradict the Communist Party. And that is the bad part about China, the communist part of China. Those bad aspects of China are communist, but the good economic aspects of China are certainly capitalist. Billionaires and millionaires exist in China, all while millions of people live in poverty in China. How exactly is that communism? How is it that there are so many billionaires and millionaires in China when there are also so many poor people in China? Because the place is capitalist. Remember that in communism, the civilians are equally poor, but the presidents and the ministers are rich. Their families and friends are rich, all while they pretend that we are all equally poor. The funniest thing is that Mao Zedong's own father started off as a poor peasant, but he later became one of the wealthiest farmers in Shaoshan. This means that Mao Zedong grew up as a rich child. This means that if someone else had been in charge, Mao, his father, and the entire family could have been murdered as being members of the bourgeoisie. They were a successful capitalist family. The same applies to Fidel Castro. He wasn't a poor person, but he became even richer by the time he died. Because communism benefits a few while capitalism benefits anyone regardless of background, color, or status. Capitalism is the best form of economy because it is based on performance. If you produce good products that people need and are willing to pay for, your company will be successful. You will be successful, period. And to answer the question, no, China is not a communist country. Its success is due to capitalism. Please subscribe, share the video, and like. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Katlego. This is Citizen Concerned. And until next time, beware of the comrades.
Capitalism itself has failed. It's good that you say communism has failed, fine. But capitalism is also a failed system, because that's what we have had so far, and what are we sitting with? Well, the most unequal society in the world.
Jumping in here. You can't say we're running, this is not a capitalism system that we're running in South Africa.
What are we running?
What is it? We are running some kind of bureaucratic nightmare.
经过43年的反思，我现在认识到自己当年做错了，我现在应该向母亲道歉，并且应该向母亲忏悔。我认为，文革是一场导致中华民族劫难的浩劫，应该记住这个惨痛的历史教训，绝不能让它重演。
I'm 70 now. Now is the Rega generation 70. I hope that they reflect, they regret, they re-examine what should we prevent this kind of human tragedy happen again.